Today I will tell the incredible story of a shy waitress named Eva Carter, who was just trying to survive another shift when the city's most dangerous mafia boss made her an outrageous offer. "Look me in the eyes, and I'll give you 20 million, everyone froze. No one had ever dared, but Eva did. That one fearless moment pulled her into a world of guns, betrayal, forbidden love, and power. What she thought was a dare became the beginning of the most dangerous love story you'll ever hear. In the low, amber-lit hush of Giorgio's, an exclusive restaurant nestled in the heart of the city, every whisper and clink of crystal seemed magnified. Tonight, tension coiled in the air as tightly as a drawn bowstring. The usual murmur of wealthy patrons was muted. Even the waitstaff moved with hushed urgency. Eva Carter, a young waitress with gentle features and a habit of hiding behind a curtain of chestnut-brown hair, could feel her pulse fluttering in her throat. She smoothed the front of her black apron with trembling hands. Giorgio's was no stranger to VIP guests, but this was different. The entire back section had been reserved under a name spoken only in whispers among the staff: Lorenzo Vitale. Eva had heard that name before. Who in the city hadn't? A powerful mafia boss, they said, though no one dared say it too loudly. Vitale supposedly controlled half the city's underworld by age 35. He was infamous and untouchable, a man whose mere presence could send a chill down the spine of anyone with sense. At the pre-shift briefing, the restaurant manager had been pale as he instructed the staff on tonight's VIP. "Be polite. Be quick. And don't make eye contact," he warned. "Treat Mr. Vitale's table like royalty, and do not upset them." Now, as Eva balanced a tray of champagne flutes, she felt the weight of that warning. Her usual nerves were amplified. Being shy was part of her nature. She preferred to go unnoticed, to serve impeccably and then retreat. Tonight she desperately wanted to be invisible. Yet fate had other plans. From the corner of her eye, Eva saw a group of men making their way through the restaurant toward the private section. They moved in formation, like a pack of wolves among sheep. At their center was a tall man with a commanding stride. Even before she could make out his features, she felt his aura ripple through the room. Conversations faltered. Silverware paused mid-air. Lorenzo Vitale had arrived. Eva's heart lurched. She fixed her gaze on the tray in her hands, as she'd been instructed. Her palms were damp around the glass stems. She stepped aside with the other staff as the group passed. Lorenzo's entourage was 5 or 6 men, all sharply dressed in tailored suits that couldn't quite conceal the bulges of weapons beneath. They radiated an alert, predatory energy. Then there was him. Lorenzo Vitale's presence was magnetic and terrifying all at once. Eva caught a fleeting glimpse of him as he went by. A strong jaw, raven black hair swept back neatly, a Roman nose and high cheekbones. He carried himself with an easy confidence, as if the entire restaurant, the entire city, were his to command. For a heartbeat, his eyes flickered in her direction. Eva's breath hitched. She quickly looked down, heart pounding, praying he hadn't noticed her stealing a glance. In that split second, she had seen his eyes, dark and keen, absorbing rather than reflecting the light. There was something dangerous there, an intensity that made her feel as though a cold finger trailed down her spine. No wonder everyone said not to look Lorenzo Vitale in the eye. The group settled at the large round table in the velvet-roped private section. Eva exhaled slowly, only then realizing she'd been holding her breath. "You okay?" A soft whisper came from beside her. It was Marisol, a fellow waitress and her closest friend on staff. Eva gave a tight, quick nod. "Fine, just nervous." Marisol offered a sympathetic half-smile. "Me too. Just keep your head down and do your job. One dinner service and he'll be gone." Eva swallowed and nodded again. One dinner service. In a few hours, Lorenzo Vitale would hopefully leave and life would return to normal, or what passed for normal in her world. She made her way toward the kitchen to pick up appetizers for one of her tables, carefully avoiding looking toward the back. As she passed near the private section, she could hear low murmurs from Vitale's party, speaking in a mix of English and Italian. Her high school Italian was rusty, but she caught a few words. Affair, deal, familia, family. She bit her lip and forced herself not to eavesdrop. The last thing she wanted was to overhear something she shouldn't. In the kitchen, the chef loaded her tray with artfully plated antipasti. tray balanced on her shoulder, Ava stepped back out to the dining floor. She wound her way to table 12, which unfortunately sat uncomfortably close to the private section. The wealthy couple at 12 were regulars. They barely glanced at her as she laid down their dishes. Ava had just placed the last plate when a burst of deep laughter from Vitali's table made her hand jolt. Her heart leapt as a half-filled champagne flute on her tray tipped. In horror, she watched golden liquid slosh over the rim and splash onto the immaculate white sleeve of one of the men at Vitali's table, an older gentleman with silver at his temples and an intimidating scowl. Time stopped. The man pushed back from the table with a sharp curse, staring at the wet stain spreading on his expensive suit. Eva's stomach dropped to the floor. "Oh no, mi dispiace. I'm so sorry," Eva blurted in a panic, defaulting to Italian as she grabbed a cloth from her apron. Without thinking, she ducked under the velvet rope into the private area and began dabbing at the man's sleeve. Her mind screamed at her that she was making it worse, that she was breaking the unspoken barrier, but she was already in motion. The conversation around the table died. Eva felt the weight of multiple gazes pinning her in place, especially one gaze, heavy and unyielding. Lorenzo Vitale was watching her. The silver-haired man whose suit she'd splashed snatched the napkin from her hand with a glare. "Stai attenta, ragazza," he growled. "Watch yourself, girl." Her cheeks burned with embarrassment and fear. This was exactly the kind of mistake she'd prayed not to make. "I'm very sorry, sir," Eva managed, voice quavering. I'll bring club soda to help with the stain. Or pay for dry cleaning." "Basta." The calm, deep command cut through her babbling. Enough. Lorenzo Vitale's quiet order silenced not only Eva, but also the angry man and the entire table. Eva's pulse roared in her ears as that same voice addressed her directly. "Miss, come here," Lorenzo said. Eva's feet felt rooted to the carpet. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her survival sense told her that disobeying might be worse. Gathering what little courage she had left, she turned and took a few shaky steps to stand beside Lorenzo's chair at the head of the table. She kept her eyes on the polished floor, fixed on the toes of his Italian leather shoes. Up close, the air around him felt charged. He didn't speak right away. The silence stretched unbearably. She could feel her heart thudding, her tray quivering in her hands. Finally, Lorenzo spoke, his tone unreadable. "What's your name?" "Eva, sir," she said softly. Her voice barely worked. "Eva," Lorenzo repeated slowly, as if tasting the sound. "Look at me, Eva." It was an instruction, gentle but firm. Eva's breath caught. "Don't!" her manager's warning echoed in her head. But how could she refuse him now? Her eyes flickered upward before she lost her nerve and cast them down again. In that millisecond, she saw the lower half of his face. Clean-shaven, a strong chin, a faint scar along his jaw that disappeared under the shadow of his collar. The realization that she was standing within arm's reach of a man rumored to order hits made her lightheaded. "Are you afraid of me?" Lorenzo asked quietly. His voice was low, for her ears only, yet Eva felt it like a physical caress of sound. It was such an unexpected question that she froze. I just, she stammered, unable to finish. Of course she was afraid. Any sane person would be. He exhaled, not quite a sigh. "My reputation precedes me, I see," he said. "But I asked you to look at me when I'm speaking to you. It's basic respect." He paused, and there was a subtle softening of his tone. "And to be honest, it disappoints me that a young woman who speaks Italian so nicely is too frightened to meet my eyes." Eva's stomach churned. He had noticed her Italian. Of course he had. Nothing escaped him. And now he was disappointed? The notion that he might be let down by her behavior was surreal. "I'm sorry," she whispered, mortified, eyes stinging with the threat of tears. "I meant no disrespect, Mr. Vitale." A heavy silence followed. Then Lorenzo spoke, raising his voice just enough for not only Eva but the entire nearby area to hear. "No disrespect, Then prove it. Look at me." The world constricted to the circle of light around Lorenzo's table. Eva felt sweat dampen her neck under her hair. She couldn't. And yet how could she not? Every fiber of her being was poised on a knife's edge between fight and flight. Lorenzo shifted, and she sensed rather than saw him lean back in his chair. His next words rang out clearly. "How about this? I'll give you $20 million if you dare to look me in the eyes. A stunned hush fell. Eva's mind blanked. Surely she hadn't heard correctly. $20 million? A few startled gasps rose from other tables nearby. One of the men at Lorenzo's table let out a low chuckle of disbelief. Her heart pounded wildly as the offer hung in the air. He had to be joking or testing the room. $20 million for something as simple as eye contact? No one would actually... Eva realized everyone was watching her, waiting to see what she'd do. Her cheeks flamed hot. She was the focal point of Lorenzo's cruel spectacle now. Pride warred with terror inside her. Her thoughts flitted to her father, to the pile of medical bills at home, to the hopelessness that had been gnawing at her for months. $20 million could change everything. Cure her father, save their home, give them a life. Was it really on the table or just a sadistic taunt? Lorenzo's voice dropped to a silken coax. No one? He was enjoying the silence of the room, the way no one else dared respond. It was clear the challenge was meant for her alone. He hadn't even glanced around to the others. Eva's nails bit into her palms. The way he was using her fear to prove a point, to amuse himself, stirred something hot inside her chest. She hated feeling like a cowering child. And beyond that, a tiny voice of reason said, if there was even a chance this offer was genuine, how could she not take it? For her father's sake, if not her own, she drew a shaky breath. Slowly, Eva lifted her chin, following the line of his tailored suit up to his face. Over his strong jaw, past his slightly crooked nose, and finally into his eyes. It was like stepping into a free fall. Lorenzo Vitale's eyes were dark, fathomless pools fixed on hers. Time seemed to slow. She dimly heard someone suck in a breath nearby. The din of the restaurant faded under the pounding of her pulse. She stepped back, dropping her eyes. Thank you, she stammered uncertainly, not even sure what she was thanking him for. The promise of money? Or simply that he hadn't harmed her? Barely able to feel her legs, Eva retreated out of the private section, ducking under the rope. Her face was hot, and her entire body trembled with a delayed surge of adrenaline. She grabbed her abandoned tray from table 12 with numb fingers and fled toward the kitchen. The moment the swinging doors closed behind her, Eva sagged against the stainless steel counter. Her heart was hammering and her mind was a blur. Did that truly happen? Marisol was at her side in an instant, eyes huge. What the hell just happened? She whispered. Eva, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Eva let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I think I just earned $20 million, she managed, voice dazed. Marisol's jaw dropped. Oh my God. She grabbed Eva's shoulders, peering at her as if to ensure she was still in one piece. And he's not angry? He laughed, Eva said, still somewhat incredulous. Her pulse was slowly coming down from a sprint. She pressed a hand to her burning cheeks, trying to ground herself. He actually laughed. Marisol looked equal parts relieved and astonished. Well, whatever you did, it worked. But Eva? Her tone turned urgent. Please be careful. Men like him, they don't just do things for no reason. Before Eva could respond, a bell dinged for an order up. The kitchen bustle surged around them. Marisol gave her a quick hug. We'll talk after closing, she promised, then went to handle her tables. Eva took a minute to breathe, then forced herself to resume working. The night wasn't over. Somehow she delivered the rest of her table's desserts, refilled coffees, and presented checks all in a haze. By the time Giorgio's closed and the last patron left, Eva felt like she was floating outside her own body. Mr. Vitale and his party had departed a little while earlier. She hadn't seen them go. She'd made sure to stay well out of sight. As she was wiping down the final table, the manager approached her, looking uncomfortable. Eva, he said. Mr. Vitale asked me to give you this. In his hand was a black envelope embossed with a gold V emblem. With a shaky hand, Eva accepted it. Thank you, she murmured. The envelope felt heavy and important between her fingers. Once she finished her tasks and hung up her apron, she finally dared to open it. Inside was a single thick cream-colored card. Miss Carter, it read in neat handwriting, join me tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock at the Imperial Hotel Lounge. Ask for the private suite. We have financial matters to discuss. LV below, that was a phone number. Eva's heart flipped. He wanted to meet again, presumably to handle the money transfer. Financial matters made it sound so formal. 7 o'clock at the Imperial Hotel, one of the most luxurious spots in the city. It both reassured and terrified her that the meeting was in a public place. At least it wasn't an order to come to some secluded warehouse. Marisol hovered at her elbow as they stepped out into the cool midnight air. Did he? She gestured at the envelope. Eva let her read the card. Imperial Hotel, Marisol breathed. This is unreal. Eva swallowed. I don't know if I should go. Saying it aloud felt strange. How could she even consider not going after what transpired? Marisol chewed her lip. If he's going to give you what he promised, he probably expects you to show up. But Eva, please be careful. You know what he is. Eva did know. Lorenzo Vitale was dangerous. But strangely, in the moment she'd met his eyes, she had seen not just danger, but a spark of something human. And he had kept his word, at least so far. I'll be careful, Eva promised. I'll text you the whole time. I have to find out if this is real. I can't walk away from what it could do for my dad. Marisol nodded, tears suddenly shining in her eyes as she grabbed Eva in a fierce hug. I understand. Just promise me you won't get in over your head. Eva hugged her back. I promise. They parted at the subway, and Eva rode home in a daze. Her mind spun with possibilities and fears in equal measure. By the time she quietly let herself into the small apartment she shared with her father, it was nearly 1 a.m. Her father had fallen asleep in his recliner with the TV on. Eva gently turned off the set and roused him. Dad, she whispered, helping the groggy middle-aged man to his feet. Come on, let's get you to bed. He leaned on her as they shuffled to his bedroom. Even through his pajamas, she could feel the sharp angle of his shoulder. He'd lost so much weight during chemotherapy. Late night? He mumbled. Busy at the restaurant, she replied softly. Guilt tugged at her. She wasn't ready to explain what really happened, but it went okay. He patted her hand. You work too hard, sweetie. You need to take care of yourself, too. Eva swallowed the lump in her throat. Don't worry about me, Dad. We'll get through this. I promise. After he fell asleep, she retreated to her own tiny room. Only then did she let the events of the night replay in her mind in full technicolor. She pressed the black card from Lorenzo between her fingers. $20 million. It didn't feel real, yet tomorrow might confirm it. Eva set an alarm on her phone for the afternoon, knowing she'd need rest. But sleep didn't come easily. When she closed her eyes, she saw Lorenzo's dark gaze and felt again that dizzying moment of defiance. Eventually, exhaustion overtook her. The next day passed in a surreal blur. Eva called out of her restaurant shift, citing a family emergency, which wasn't far from the truth. If this meeting went poorly, it could very well become one. She spent the day helping her father with an appointment and running a few errands, trying to keep busy. By late afternoon, she was standing in front of her closet, agonizing over what to wear. Most of her clothes were simple and practical. The Imperial Hotel lounge called for something upscale. In the end, she settled on a knee-length black dress with long sleeves, one of the only truly nice dresses she owned, and low nude heels. She let her hair down from its usual work ponytail, brushing it until it shone in soft waves around her shoulders. A touch of mascara and lip gloss finished the look. She rarely wore more makeup than that. Staring at herself in the mirror, Eva barely recognized the woman gazing back. There was color in her cheeks, and a nervous brightness in her green eyes that hadn't been there in a long time. She was excited, she realized. Nervous as hell, yes, but also excited by the prospect of seeing Lorenzo again. The thought sent a flutter through her stomach. It's not a date, she told herself firmly. It's a business meeting. But a tiny voice in her mind whispered that no business meeting had ever made her heart race like this. She left a note for her father saying she was meeting a friend from work and not to wait up, then called a rideshare to take her to the hotel. Dusk had fallen by the time the car pulled up to the Imperial's grand entrance, all marble and golden light. Eva stepped through the lobby, head held high even though inside she felt like an imposter. A concierge directed her to the top-floor lounge, and soon she found herself in a private suite that took her breath away. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking the glittering city skyline. A grand piano stood gracefully in one corner, and plush armchairs were arranged near a low table set with crystal glasses and a chilled bottle of champagne. And there, Gazing out at the view with one hand in his pocket, stood Lorenzo Vitale. He turned as the doors closed behind her. Their eyes met across the opulent room, and Ava's heart gave a traitorous little skip. Lorenzo was clad in another impeccable suit, charcoal gray today, and looked every inch the sophisticated mogul. Yet something in his expression softened when he saw her. "Miss Carter," he greeted with a warm, slow smile. "You came." "Good evening, Mr. Vitale," Eva replied, willing her voice to stay steady. She walked toward him on legs that felt surprisingly solid given her nerves. "Thank you for inviting me. Please, call me Lorenzo," he said. He gestured to the seating area. "Join me, can I offer you a drink?" Eva eased herself into one of the armchairs. "Maybe just water, thank you." Lorenzo gave a nod and went to the sideboard. As he poured her a glass from a carafe, she took a moment to study him surreptitiously. In this neutral setting, without his men around, he looked a bit less forbidding, handsome undeniably, but also human. Last night, he had seemed like a force of nature. Tonight, he was a man inviting her for drinks. He returned and handed her the water, then settled in the chair opposite, his own drink a finger's width of amber whiskey. "How are you feeling today, Eva?" he asked, his tone genuinely interested. "I imagine last night was a lot." She let out a breathy laugh. "That's one way to put it. I'm still processing it all, to be honest." "I'm sure," he said. He swirled the whiskey in his glass, gaze never leaving her face. "I owe you an apology. I put you on the spot in front of everyone. It was unfair." Eva was taken aback by that. I appreciate that, but I think I put myself on the spot too. I could have just run away." "No, most people wouldn't have done what you did," Lorenzo said. A hint of admiration colored his voice. "You surprised me, Eva. Not many people manage that." A shy heat crept up her neck. She sipped her water to cover her fluster. "I was pretty surprised myself," she admitted. "I'm usually not so bold." He smiled, and she noticed the way it lit something warm in his eyes. "Perhaps you've just never been given the right opportunity to be bold until now." They shared a small, almost conspiratorial look, and Eva felt a flutter in her chest. Lorenzo cleared his throat softly and set his drink down. "As much as I'm enjoying this, I imagine you're eager to discuss the financial matter I mentioned." He reached into an elegant leather folio on the table and produced a document. "I've had my lawyers prepare a simple transfer contract for the funds. It states that you're receiving a gift of $20 million from me, with no obligations on your part. It's mostly for tax and legal purposes to keep everything above board." Eva took the papers with tentative fingers. Sure enough, it was a straightforward gift contract. Her name and Lorenzo's were typed neatly, alongside a dizzying amount of zeros. This was it. It was really happening. Her throat felt tight with emotion as she looked back up at him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You're changing my life." Lorenzo's expression gentled. "I'm simply keeping my promise. The circumstances might have been unorthodox, but you won that dare fairly. And," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I find I rather enjoy using my resources for something good for a change." Eva signed where indicated, hand shaking just a touch. In that moment, her hand trembled slightly. It felt as if she had just signed a new destiny into existence. Only a day ago, she had been scraping by on tips. Now, with a few pen strokes, every desperate worry had been lifted from her shoulders. Lorenzo countersigned and gathered the documents. "There. The transfer will be initiated first thing in the morning." He leaned back and regarded her with an approving nod. "Congratulations, Ava. You're now a very wealthy woman." She exhaled a shaky laugh. "It hardly feels real." "It will when you see your bank balance," he chuckled. He lifted his whiskey. "To courage changing fortunes." She raised her water and clinked his glass. "To courage," she echoed, smiling. They drank, and for a moment silence fell. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Ava felt a weight had been lifted that had nothing to do with money. She realized she trusted this man before her, trusted him to keep his word. It was a strange feeling, given who he was. Perhaps it was the way he had softened with her, peeling back a bit of that formidable mask. Lorenzo set his drink aside. "Eva, may I ask, what will you do now? With the money, that is. You had reasons you needed it, I suspect." She nodded, resting her glass in her lap. "My father, He's very sick, cancer. He needs surgery and treatment that we couldn't afford. Until now. I'll make sure he gets the best care. After that, I can clear our debts. And maybe, she added with a small, hopeful smile, I can go back to finish my degree part-time. I had to drop out to work when he got ill. You put your life on hold for your family. Lorenzo said it not as a question, but as an understanding. His eyes softened in a way that made her chest ache. Your father is lucky to have a daughter like you. I'm the lucky one. He raised me on his own after my mom died. I'd do anything for him, Eva said, voice thick with gratitude that now, because of Lorenzo, she actually could do what was needed. Lorenzo inclined his head. Family is everything. I lost my father a couple of years ago, but I still find myself trying to live up to what he expected of me. He must have been very proud of you, Eva offered gently. A shadow flickered over Lorenzo's face. Perhaps. He was a difficult man to please. But he taught me everything, how to be strong, how to lead, how to keep my word. Any success I have, I owe to him. He sighed, then gave a wry smile. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get melancholic. It's all right. Thank you for sharing that with me, Eva said earnestly. She felt honored that he'd opened a personal window, however briefly. It sounds like you carry a lot. He shrugged one shoulder. The mantle fell to me, whether I wanted it or not. One doesn't simply walk away from a legacy like ours. Though sometimes I wonder... He trailed off, then shook his head, dismissing the thought. Never mind. A quiet moment passed. Eva realized with some surprise that she felt comfortable. The nerves that had knotted her stomach earlier were gone. They sat in companionable silence, listening to the faint strains of jazz music filtering in and the distant hum of the city below. Lorenzo watched her for a long moment, his gaze thoughtful. Eva, you mentioned last night that you're not usually so bold. I hope you know that what you did took remarkable courage. Eva felt her cheeks warm. I think I was a little crazy, to be honest. He chuckled. Maybe a little, but brave all the same. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. If you don't mind me saying, I find that refreshing. In my world, most people tell me what they think I want to hear. They fear me or they want something from me. You, on the other hand, acted on principle. Even when you were afraid, she bit her lip. I didn't want you to think I was cowardly. And yes, I needed the money, but in that moment, it was like I had to prove to both of us that I could do it. Lorenzo's lips curved. You certainly proved it. And I confess, it's been a long time since anyone surprised me the way you did. Heat bloomed in Eva's chest, part pride, part something more tender. I'm glad, she said softly. He smiled at her then, warm, genuine. The sort of smile that made her heart flip. You have a very giving nature, Eva. It's not often someone in my position meets someone like you. She looked down, shy under the intensity of his compliment. Someone like me? Kind, honest, fearless when it counts, he listed. Those are rare qualities in my circles. Silence fell again, this time charged with a subtle new tension. Eva's mind raced. Was he merely being polite, or could it be that he liked her? She scolded herself inwardly. This was a powerful mafia don. He wasn't interested in her beyond this strange business. And yet, the way he gazed at her now, the softness in his eyes, the relaxed openness of his posture compared to last night, something had shifted. Eva realized with a start she'd been staring into his eyes for who knows how long, without fear this time. She flushed and looked away. I should probably go. I've taken up enough of your evening, she said reluctantly. The last thing she wanted was to leave, but she knew she couldn't stay here making moon eyes at him all night. Lorenzo checked his watch and frowned slightly, as if he too regretted how time had flown. If you must, but at least allow me to have my driver take you home. He stood, straightening his jacket. Eva rose as well. You really don't have to. I can just grab a cab. He held up a hand, silencing her protests with a gentle smile. Humor me. After last night, I insist on ensuring you get home safely. His protective tone sent a little flutter through her. All right, she acquiesced. Lorenzo pressed a number on his phone and murmured instructions for his car to be brought around. Then he walked with her to the suite's door. Ava's heart thumped harder with each step toward parting. At the door, she turned to face him. Thank you again, for everything, she said earnestly. Words felt insufficient for the gratitude and admiration welling inside her. Lorenzo reached out and, to her surprise, gently took her hand. He lifted it and brushed the back with a soft kiss. The old-world gesture made her breath catch. "It was my pleasure, Eva," he said, his voice low. "I have a feeling this won't be the last time we meet." Her eyes widened slightly. "It won't?" He still held her hand, his thumb unconsciously caressing her knuckles. "I hope not," he murmured. Something unspoken passed between them, something that sent a warm thrill through Eva's core. For a moment they stood there, close enough that she could see the faint shadow of stubble beginning on his jaw, could catch the scent of his cologne, woodsy and clean. His dark eyes searched hers as if trying to read her thoughts. Eva's face felt hot. She realized she was staring again and looked down, reluctantly slipping her hand from his. "Good night, Lorenzo," she whispered. "Buonanotte, Eva," he replied, the Italian rolling off his tongue like an endearment. She managed a smile before turning and slipping out the door. Her heart was pounding as she crossed the foyer to the private elevator where his driver, a burly man named Marco, waited to escort her. In the elevator's mirrored wall, Eva saw her reflection and barely recognized the flush of happiness on her own face. Happiness and longing. She already missed Lorenzo's presence, and that realization both delighted and frightened her. The sleek town car ride home felt dreamlike. Eva found herself replaying every word, every glance from the evening. She knew she was in deep trouble. Because it wasn't just gratitude she felt towards Lorenzo Vitale. It was an undeniable attraction, one that tugged at her more strongly by the hour. It was nearly midnight when Eva let herself into her apartment. Her father was fast asleep. Quietly, she changed out of her dress and hung it up, then crawled into bed. Only then did she allow the tears that had been gathering to slip free. They were tears of relief, of overwhelming joy that her father's future was secure, and of confusion over this powerful connection she felt to the man who had made it so. Clutching Lorenzo's business card under her pillow, Eva drifted into the deepest sleep she'd had in months, with the echo of his warm goodbye replaying in her dreams. Over the next 2 days, Lorenzo's promise came true. An astonishing deposit appeared in Eva's bank account, and she immediately set to work using it for good. She scheduled her father's much-needed surgery at the best hospital, and paid off every lingering bill and debt that had weighed on them for years. Her father was bewildered and overjoyed by the sudden change in their fortunes. Eva kept her explanations vague, saying an old investment or benefactor had come through. He wept with relief as she assured him everything was taken care of. Despite the flurry of arrangements and calls, Eva's thoughts often drifted to Lorenzo. Since their meeting at the Imperial Hotel, he hadn't contacted her. She told herself not to expect anything. He had already done more than enough. Still, she found herself glancing at her phone, wondering if he might call. The quiet apartment felt charged with the memory of his laughter and the intensity of his gaze. On the third evening, restlessness got the better of her. Eva decided to take a walk to her favorite corner bakery for some fresh air and a treat. She told her father she'd be back shortly, grabbed her coat, and headed out just after dusk. The air was crisp, and the sidewalks lightly dusted with the first dry leaves of autumn. Eva welcomed the cool breeze on her face as she walked the familiar route. Everything in her life had changed so fast. She needed a moment to breathe, to absorb that they were safe now. Her father's surgery was scheduled. Their bills were gone. A miracle had dropped into her lap, courtesy of a man who was at once fearsome and wonderful. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the dark sedan creeping along the curb behind her. Not until heavy footsteps suddenly rushed up. Before she could react, a pair of hands lunged out of the shadows. One clamped over her mouth, smothering the scream that jumped to her throat. Another arm seized her around the waist, lifting her clear off the ground. Eva's eyes went wide with terror. No! She kicked out, her heel striking something solid, and heard a grunt of pain. "Aiuto, help!" She tried to scream, but it came out muffled against the gloved palm. "Quiet!" A harsh voice snarled in her ear, thick with an accent she dimly recognized as Russian. Her blood turned to ice. She thrashed wildly, refusing to be an easy victim. Her elbow caught her attacker's rib and he cursed. "Little bitch, hold her!" he barked to someone. Rough hands grabbed her legs as a second man moved in. In a swift, practiced motion, they wrapped a strip of cloth around Eva's head, gagging her mouth tightly. Panic surged. She couldn't breathe well, and the taste of bitter chemical on the rag burned her tongue. Each thunderous gunshot reverberated off the rafters, a deafening boom that rattled Eva's bones. A sharp pain exploded at the side of Eva's head as one of the men struck her temple with something heavy, perhaps the butt of a gun. White stars burst in her vision. The fight went out of her limbs, her body suddenly limp in their hold. Distantly, she felt herself being dragged. The world tilted sickeningly as they shoved her into a vehicle. A door slammed. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was the growl of an engine and the pounding of her own heart. A cold splash of water jerked Eva back to consciousness. She gasped, choking, her whole body jolting. Blinking water out of her eyes, she found herself in a dimly lit, cavernous space. The smell of damp concrete and motor oil filled her nose. A single hanging lamp cast a harsh circle of light. She was in a warehouse, she realized hazily, and she was tied to a metal chair. Hands bound behind her back, ankles lashed to the chair legs. Her head throbbed where she'd been hit. Eva squinted at the figures looming just beyond the lamp's glow. 2 men stood there, one bald and muscular, with a scar slicing down his cheek. She vaguely recognized him as the one who gagged her. The other was leaner, with pale eyes and a suit that seemed out of place in this gritty setting. Pale Eyes stepped forward, appraising her. "Miss Carter, I presume," he said. His voice was smooth, lightly accented in Russian. Eva's blood ran cold. None of this felt real. Her voice came out in a panicked rasp. "Well, what do you want? Why did you bring me here?" The bald thug moved swiftly, delivering a hard backhanded slap across her face. "You speak when Mr. Petrov asks you to speak," he snarled. Pain blossomed hot on her cheek and Eva tasted blood. Tears sprang to her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She set her jaw and glared at the bald man. "Enough, Ivan," the suited man, Petrov apparently said sharply. He crouched slightly so he was more at eye level with Eva. "I apologize for my associate's rough manners. Emotions are high. You see, your friend has caused me a great deal of trouble." Eva's heart thumped. Friend. He could only mean Lorenzo. She swallowed, throat dry. "I don't know what you're talking about," she managed, voice shaking. Petrov smiled thinly. "My name is Viktor Petrov. You might have heard of me." She had. The Petrov crime family, Russian mafia, were known players in the city's underbelly, and bitter rivals to the Italian families like the Vitalis, Petrov continued, circling slowly around her chair. "It wasn't hard to learn about you, Miss Carter. A little bird at Giorgio's told us the timid waitress who caught Lorenzo Vitale's eye suddenly came into a great deal of money, and I thought to myself, now that is interesting." Eva's blood turned to ice. "They know. They knew everything." Petrov leaned down, his voice a mockery of confidentiality. "Do you know what I want? I want a word with your Mr. Vitale, and you, my dear, are going to ensure I get it." Her mouth had gone dry under the gag. She mustered a glare. Petrov straightened, nodding to Ivan. The bald man pulled the gag down roughly, letting it hang around her neck. Eva coughed, her throat burning. "Lorenzo doesn't care about me," she croaked desperately. "If you're doing this to get to him," Petrov chuckled. "Oh, but we believe he does care. Why else would King Vitale lavish a nobody with a fortune and personal attention?" He brushed a finger under her chin, tilting her face up. She jerked away in disgust. "He made a mistake becoming involved with you, and mistakes must be punished." Eva's heart was going to burst from terror. "Please," she whispered, "just let me go." "I won't—" "Quiet!" Petrov snapped, impatience flashing. He pulled a phone from his pocket and checked it. "It's time." He barked something in Russian. Immediately, Ivan and another heavy-set man sprang into action. They wheeled Eva, chair and all, across the concrete floor into the wider open space of the warehouse, positioning her in a crude spotlight under the lamp. Ivan then pressed the muzzle of a handgun hard against her temple. Eva couldn't suppress a whimper at the feel of the cold metal against her skull. The other henchman took up position in the shadows to the side, assault rifle in hand, and aimed toward the large sliding door of the warehouse. Petrov stood in front of Eva a few yards back. He raised his own pistol, pointing it generally in her direction as he called out into the darkness, "Vitale." "Come in, don't be shy." Eva's heart seized. Through the wide gap of the partly opened loading bay, she saw Lorenzo's silhouette in the twilight outside. He was here. Oh God, he came. Lorenzo stepped through the opening and into the warehouse light with measured, deliberate steps. He wore no overcoat, just a black dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows and dark slacks. In his hand, loosely, he carried a handgun pointed at the floor. His eyes immediately found Ava, and she saw raw fear and fury there before he masked it. "I'm here," he announced, voice echoing. "Let her go, Petrov. This is between you and me." Petrov laughed, a hollow sound in the emptiness. "If only it were that simple. I must say, Lorenzo, I never thought you capable of weakness. Yet here you are, coming when called for the sake of a girl." He spat the last word as if it disgusted him. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. "Name your terms," he ground out. He kept his gun lowered, but his posture was taut, coiled. "You want territory, money? Just tell me and let her go." Eva's heart ached hearing the controlled desperation in his tone. He was willing to give up anything for her life. The realization was both terrifying and warming all at once. Petrov smiled unpleasantly. "Very well. I'll take control of your docks on the East River and your gambling operations uptown. Effective immediately." Lorenzo's nostrils flared. That was easily a third of his empire Petrov was demanding. He hesitated only a second. "Fine," he bit out. "Take them. I'll have my lawyers transfer any holdings you want. Now release Eva." "Not so fast," Petrov said. "Drop your gun, slowly, kick it over here." Lorenzo's hand tensed around his pistol. His eyes flickered to Eva again. She gave the tiniest shake of her head, heart hammering. She didn't want him to disarm, but she also didn't want Petrov to hurt him, or her. Lorenzo's gaze hardened with resolve. Without breaking eye contact with her, he carefully bent and set his firearm on the concrete, then nudged it forward with his foot. It skittered across the floor. One of Petrov's men scooped it up. A terrible helplessness washed over Eva. Lorenzo was unarmed, outnumbered, and they both were at Petrov's mercy. Petrov's grin widened. "Good. Now come stand by your lady love, Nice and easy." Lorenzo approached until he was just a couple of steps in front of Eva's chair. Ivan kept the gun pressed to her temple, his beefy hand fisted around her hair to hold her head still. Eva whimpered involuntarily at the sting on her scalp and the bite of steel at her temple. Lorenzo's hands curled into fists at his sides. "I did what you asked." "Let her go, Victor," Petrov tisked. "In time? First, I want something more binding than a verbal promise." He nodded to the man with Lorenzo's pistol, who handed Petrov a folded document and pen. "Sign over the assets. We drafted something simple. Sign that, and she's free to go." Lorenzo took the papers, scanning them quickly. His jaw worked. "Once I sign, you'll kill us both," he said flatly. It wasn't a question. Petrov shrugged. "You don't sign, Ivan there blows her pretty brains out and I kill you anyway. Either way, I get what I want. But at least this way the two of you might live. I'm a man of business, Lorenzo. Not unnecessary bloodshed." He was lying. Eva could hear it. Petrov fully intended to execute them regardless. Lorenzo must have realized the same. His eyes narrowed, and his shoulders squared subtly as if bracing for what had to be done. Eva's breath caught. She saw the flicker of a plan forming in his expression. "All right," Lorenzo said, deceptively calm. He knelt slowly to use the floor as support and signed each page one by one. He even flipped to check they'd all been properly filled. Eva's mind screamed at him not to trust Petrov, but she bit her lip hard to stay silent. She had to trust that Lorenzo knew what he was doing. He rose, holding the papers out. "Here, it's all signed." Petrov barked an order. The henchman with the rifle slung it over his shoulder and moved forward to take the papers from Lorenzo's hand. And that's when all hell broke loose. In a blur of motion, Lorenzo seized the approaching man's rifle, yanking him off balance, and swung the butt directly into the face of the thug behind him. The man with the rifle fumbled, stunned by the sudden attack. Lorenzo pivoted, leveling the rifle, and pulled the trigger. The deafening crack of the gunshot in the enclosed space made Eva jump. The distant henchman who'd been lurking fell with a cry, clutching his leg. Lorenzo had winged him before he could draw his weapon. Petrov shouted in fury and opened fire. Lorenzo spun behind the rifleman, using the man's body as a shield. Bullets tore into the hapless thug with sickening thuds. Lorenzo returned fire over the man's shoulder, forcing Petrov to dive behind a support pillar. The instant Ivan's attention faltered at the chaos, Eva knew it was her chance. She twisted and drove her elbow back into Ivan's groin with every bit of strength she had. He bellowed in pain, the gun wavering from her head for one precious second. Eva threw herself to the side, chair and all, crashing hard to the ground. Ivan's shot went wide, the muzzle flash lighting the space where her head had been. Lorenzo was on him in an instant. He dropped the rifle and lunged, a flash of steel in his hand. He must have grabbed a fallen knife. There was a brief struggle and then a wet gurgle as Lorenzo slashed across Ivan's throat. The big man crumpled with a thud, eyes staring sightlessly. Ava was sprawled on her side, still tied to the chair. Gunshots rang out again, Petrov stepping from cover to unload his clip at Lorenzo. Lorenzo dove and rolled, narrowly avoiding the hail of bullets. One round grazed his upper arm. Eva saw him flinch, a dark stain spreading on his sleeve. Empty clicks echoed as Petrov emptied the last rounds. With a snarl, he tossed the spent pistol and reached into his jacket for a spare. Lorenzo pounced before Petrov could draw his second gun. The two men collided, grappling fiercely just a few feet from where Eva lay. Petrov was tall but lean, no match in strength for the broad-shouldered Vitaly heir. Still, rage fueled him. He clawed and landed a blow to Lorenzo's injured arm, eliciting a grunt of pain. Ava struggled against the ropes at her wrists, desperate to free herself, desperate to help. Her fingers brushed something cold and metal on the floor. Ivan's dropped handgun, lying inches from her bound hands. Biting down on her fear, Eva stretched for it. Lorenzo and Petrov crashed to the floor in a tangle. Petrov straddled Lorenzo and drew a small knife from an ankle sheath, raising it high. Lorenzo caught his wrist, stopping the blade inches from his own throat. His face contorted with effort as Petrov pressed with a crazed grin. Eva's fingers closed around the pistol grip. Hands shaking, she awkwardly maneuvered it in her lap and flicked off the safety, praying she remembered correctly how it worked. Petrov forced the knife closer, a drop of blood blooming on Lorenzo's neck where the tip pricked skin. Lorenzo growled, using both arms to hold back Petrov's weight, but his wounded arm trembled. Eva took a steadying breath, propping herself up against the fallen chairback. She aimed the gun with unsteady hands at the man atop Lorenzo. "Please, please," she begged silently and squeezed the trigger. The gunshot cracked like thunder. Petrov jerked, the knife falling from his grasp as a dark red hole blossomed in his suit just below the ribs. Lorenzo, eyes wide, shoved him off. In one fluid motion, Lorenzo snatched Petrov's dropped pistol nearby and fired 2 shots into Petrov's chest. The Russian mob boss fell back and lay still, eyes staring up at the warehouse rafters. Suddenly it was quiet. The only sounds were Eva's ragged breathing and Lorenzo's pained grunts as he stumbled to his feet. It was over. Dear God, it was over. Eva let the gun slip from her grip. Her hands were raw and bleeding where the ropes had torn into them during her struggles. She realized she was crying only when a sob ripped free from her throat. "Eva!" Lorenzo was at her side in an instant, ignoring his own injuries. He righted the chair, then sliced through the ropes binding her with Petrov's fallen knife. The moment her hands were free, Eva threw her arms around Lorenzo's neck, clinging to him. He crushed her against him, one hand cradling the back of her head. "Dio mio, are you hurt?" he rasped, voice breaking. He pulled back just enough to scan her face, his own dark eyes wild with worry. Aside from the bruise on her cheek and a throbbing headache, Eva felt no pain, just overwhelming relief. "I am okay," she managed between sobs. "Lorenzo, you're bleeding." "It's nothing," he insisted. He wiped at the trickle of blood on his neck where Petrov's knife had nicked him, then cupped her face between his palms. His thumb brushed tenderly over the red mark blooming on her cheek. "I was so afraid I'd lose you," he confessed hoarsely. The raw emotion in his tone undid her. Eva let out a weak laugh that was more tears than mirth. "I was afraid you'd get yourself killed for me," she whispered. He shook his head, eyes never leaving hers. "I would walk through hell and back for you, Ava. When I got that message..." His voice caught. He pressed his forehead to hers, closing his eyes. "I have never been more terrified." Eva realized her hands were still trembling as she lifted them to gently wipe a streak of blood from his brow. "You saved me," she said. "You saved us both." He opened his eyes, and in them she saw such fierce devotion that it stole her breath. "No, you saved us," he murmured. "Your courage back there. Dio, I have never seen anything like it." Eva managed a watery smile. "I couldn't let anything happen to you. I wouldn't." A soft, incredulous laugh puffed from him. He pulled her in, wrapping his arms around her in a near bone-crushing hug. She buried her face against his shoulder, breathing him in, smoke, sweat, and that underlying cedar citrus of his cologne. He was alive. They both were. Lorenzo gently eased back, just enough to tilt her chin up. His gaze roamed over her tear-streaked face, filled with awe and tenderness. "You mean so much to me, Eva," he said quietly, intensely. "More than I ever thought possible." Eva let out a soft, incredulous laugh of relief, even as tears brimmed in her eyes. Overcome, she reached up on her toes and pressed her lips to his in a fleeting, fervent kiss. Lorenzo froze only a split second before he returned the kiss, gentle and trembling against her mouth. In the dark silence of the warehouse, that brief touch spoke every word they couldn't yet say aloud. They drew apart just as quickly, foreheads still resting together, both a little breathless. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Someone in the area likely reported the gunshots. Lorenzo ignored them, one hand stroking damp strands of hair back from Eva's face. "I love you," he breathed, as if the words escaped without permission. Eva's heart swelled to bursting. "I love you too," she whispered. It felt at once crazy and the most natural truth in the world. Lorenzo closed his eyes briefly, a sheen of emotion making them shine when he opened them again. He let out a shaky laugh. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" She smiled through her tears. "Maybe the same thing you've done to me." He let out a soft groan of what sounded like pure gratitude and pulled her into another kiss. Deeper this time, pouring every unsaid feeling into it. Eva melted against him, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. For a moment, amidst the carnage and chaos, they were oblivious to anything but each other. Lorenzo gently broke the kiss and touched his forehead to hers, both of them breathing hard. In the distance, tires screeched, likely his men or the authorities closing in. "We need to get out of here," he said reluctantly. He helped Eva stand. Her legs wobbled a bit, but he steadied her against his side. Glancing around quickly, he retrieved a phone from Petrov's fallen jacket and pocketed it, then guided Eva toward a side door. They slipped into the night just as cars swarmed the other side of the warehouse. Lorenzo's own black sedan idled in the shadows of a loading bay, Marco at the wheel looking frantic. The second he spotted them, Marco jumped out. "Boss, Miss Carter!" he exclaimed, relief plain on his bruised face. "Thank God." Lorenzo gave him a tight nod. "We're all right. Is everything taken care of?" Marco grimaced. "A few of Petrov's men got away and Matteo was gone when we realized what was happening." His voice hardened with anger. Eva glanced between them, confused. Lorenzo's expression darkened. "We'll deal with Matteo later," he said grimly. Noticing Eva's puzzled look, he explained. "One of my own betrayed me. Matteo tipped Petrov off and gave him information about you. He won't get far." Eva absorbed that with a shiver. There were still enemies out there, still dangers, but Lorenzo was alive. And by his determined look, whoever had betrayed them would face justice soon enough. Lorenzo ushered Eva into the back seat of the sedan and slid in beside her. Marco floored the accelerator, the car peeling away just as red and blue police lights splashed across the opposite end of the warehouse. As they sped through the maze of city streets, Eva nestled into Lorenzo's side. Only when his arm came around her did she start to believe she was truly safe. Every part of her ached, and shock was setting in, but she clung to him, drawing strength from his warmth and solidity. He pressed a kiss to the crown of her head. "It's over," he murmured. "You're safe." Eva closed her eyes, letting the steady beat of his heart under her ear soothe her. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Lorenzo's hand gently rubbed her shoulder. "Now we move forward. Your father will get his surgery. You'll have the life you deserve." He paused, voice turning tender. "And if you're willing to take a chance, I don't want to face any of it without you." Eva felt tears prick again, but this time out of happiness. "I'm not afraid," she whispered, tilting her head to look up at him in the dark cabin. "Whatever your world is, whatever comes next, I want to be with you." Lorenzo closed his eyes briefly, as if in silent thanks. "You don't know how happy you've made me," he murmured, voice thick. "My life is complicated, but I swear I'll do everything in my power to protect you and make you happy. Eva, you deserve that and more." She reached up to touch his face, her thumb caressing the rough line of stubble along his jaw. "Being with you makes me happy," she said simply. He turned and captured her lips in a gentle, lingering kiss under the soft glow of passing streetlights. Eva answered in kind, pouring all her love and trust into that moment. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Nothing with Lorenzo would be conventional or simple, but she also knew her heart had found its home. They stayed entwined as the car carried them out of the industrial district, leaving the chaos of the night behind. Eva scarcely recognized the woman she had become in just days. The timid waitress who once kept her eyes downcast had found the strength to defy armed criminals and fight for the man she loved. In discovering Lorenzo, she had discovered her own courage, and she knew she would never be the same. A few weeks later, Eva stood in the sunny courtyard of the hospital where her father was recovering from his surgery. The winter bare trees had begun to show the first green buds of spring. At her side, Lorenzo was speaking warmly with her father, who sat bundled in a blanket on a bench, color returning to his cheeks. Eva watched the two men chat and felt a swell of gratitude. Her father's operation had been a success. He was on the mend, and every day he grew stronger. Lorenzo had ensured they had the best doctors, though he downplayed his role whenever Eva thanked him. To her father, Lorenzo was simply the generous friend who had helped Eva through a windfall and who visited often to lift their spirits. In truth, he had become much more. In the weeks since the warehouse ordeal, Lorenzo and Eva had been nearly inseparable. He handled the fallout of Petrov's demise and the remaining business quietly, never once letting any of it touch her or her family. And Eva, in turn, found herself fitting into his life in ways she never expected, offering him comfort on hard days and hope that the cycle of violence could perhaps one day be broken. Life was not suddenly a fairy tale. There were whispers in the underworld about the Vitale boss going soft, and Lorenzo still carried heavy responsibilities. Eva faced her own adjustments. She left her waitressing job, enrolled part-time in university again, and carefully planned how to use her wealth to help others as she'd dreamed. But whatever challenges arose, they faced them together, learning to balance light and dark. That afternoon, as Lorenzo caught Eva's eye over one of her father's corny jokes, they shared a private smile. Eva took a moment to marvel at how much had changed. She remembered the frightened waitress she'd been not long ago, the woman who wouldn't even meet a stranger's gaze. Now she was a woman deeply in love, unafraid to hold the stare of a mafia king and tell him what was in her heart. Eva excused herself and crossed the courtyard toward Lorenzo, slipping her hand comfortably into his. He intertwined his fingers with hers without pause, a reflex now. In his dark eyes she saw concern, warmth, and the quiet promise of unwavering devotion. She squeezed his hand. "What?" he asked softly, noticing her thoughtful expression. Eva shook her head, her lips curving into a bright, contented smile. "Nothing. Just thinking how lucky I am." Lorenzo raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss there, just as he had on the night of their first meeting. "The feeling is entirely mutual," he murmured. As her father dozed peacefully in the warm sun, and Lorenzo drew Eva a little closer against his side, she reflected on the winding path that had brought them here. So much had happened so fast. Danger, passion, and a love more fierce and true than she ever imagined. All of it traced back to one extraordinary moment, the night a mafia boss had issued a wild challenge and a shy waitress found the courage to accept. She had dared to look him in the eyes, and in doing so had found her destiny. And neither of them would trade it for all the world.